honoring the life and legacy of Bob Dole.
He led a life of service, serving other Kansans, serving veterans.
His service, sacrifice, and political contributions.
Bob Dole was a master at working with people from the other party.
As our nation pauses to remember a World War II hero and Kansas statesman.
My view is Senator Dole was a patriot, a man who loved the United States of America.
From our nation's capital to his hometown.
I don't know anybody that doesn't love Bob Dole.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Jeff Herndon.
And I'm Emily Younger. Tonight, we're honoring the life of former Senator Bob Dole, who passed away yesterday at the age of 98 after a battle with lung cancer.
His family says he passed away in his sleep early Sunday, saying, quote, "America has lost its hero and our family has lost its rock."
Tributes are pouring in from across the country. This was the scene at the U.S. Capitol after news broke of Dole's passing. Crews lowering the flag to half-staff at Speaker Pelosi's request. And across Kansas today, we've also seen flags at half-staff like this one outside of the VA hospital that bears Dole's name. Governor Laura Kelly calling for that honor. And Dole will lie in state in the Capitol Rotunda this Thursday. It's a rare honor for distinguished government or military leaders.
Yeah, in the last 3 decades, only 6 others have received the honor, 3 of them former presidents. Those who will pass by his casket will remember him as a patriot, veteran advocate, and proud Kansan.
Robert Joseph Dole was born on July 22, 1923 in Russell, Kansas. He was an outstanding student and a talented athlete, even competing at the University of Kansas. Dole joined the Army in 1942. 3 years later, his life changed forever on a hillside in Italy. Hit by a German bullet, Dole was paralyzed for a year. He lost the use of his right arm and spent 39 months in the hospital. He said he decided that if he couldn't use his hands, he would use his head. His first move, law school, followed by 8 years as county attorney in Russell. But that was just the beginning of Dole's meteoric rise in politics, from the state legislature to Congress, and in 1968, the U.S. Senate. In 1976, Dole was Gerald Ford's running mate in the presidential election. His approach to politics was simple. It's all about the people.
To be honest, I never did get comfortable with all the focus groups and spin doctors of later campaigns. I always preferred looking into the eyes of a voter rather than a TV camera. Call it old-fashioned, but in Kansas, we like our contacts to be personal and our politics to be authentic.
And along the journey, even at his political peak, the small-town Kansas kid never forgot where he came from.
It shows that you can come from a small town in America, that you don't need the wealth and all the material things in this world to succeed. If I've succeeded, and some might quarrel with that. But I want to reemphasize, as I did before, if I've done anything, it's because of people I've known up and down Main Street, and I can recall the time when I needed help, the people of Russell helped.
In 1996, Dole reached the pinnacle of his public career, accepting his party's nomination for president, sounding themes that echoed through his life.
There's no place I'd rather have as my last stop on the road to San Diego, where the Republican Party will nominate a son of Russell, Kansas, for President of the United States of America. Optimism is in our blood. I know this as few others can. There was once a time when I doubted the future. But I have learned, as many of you have learned, that obstacles can be overcome. And I have unlimited confidence in the wisdom of our people and the future of our country.
But the final step was not to be. His political life ended after that run, but his public service and his love for his country continued well into his 90s. He was vital in the fundraising for the World War II Memorial. In fact, that's where he spent much of his time these past few years.
Do we get our picture?
Meeting veterans like himself who traveled to D.C. on honor flights. We sat down with Bob Dole in 2018 to talk about it.
First we shake hands and then we chat a little bit about, I asked him what's in the Navy, Army, Merchant Marines, Air Force. I enjoy meeting fellow veterans. There are not many World War II veterans left.
And during that interview, Dole admitted he missed politics and, of course, his hometown of Russell.
Oh yeah, I had still have a lot of friends there. Many my age are gone, but my two sisters and my brother.
Dole's political accomplishments are numerous. He lost a few along the way, too. But through it all, he never lost his sense of service or his love for Kansas and country.
I'm convinced that America's best days are yet to come. May God bless you, and may God bless America. Thank you very much.
Many offering their condolences and remembrances. President Joe Biden saying, quote, Bob Dole was a man to be admired by Americans. He had an unerring sense of integrity and honor. May God bless him, and may our nation draw upon his legacy of decency, dignity, good humor, and patriotism for all time. Other Kansas lawmakers sharing their sentiments.
My view is Senator Dole was a patriot, a man who loved the United States of America. Held firm beliefs and worked to accomplish his goals for the country, but was also respectful of other people's points of view.
He just unabashedly cared deeply for the country, and his love for Kansas and for America shone through during the 79 years of his service on the world stage.
He had such a great sense of humor and, general warmth as a human being that people really just, they would be attracted to him, and he would return that in kind.
Senator Roger Marshall and Representative Sharice Davids also remembering Dole as a dedicated public servant and a hero from the greatest generation. You can see the many remembrances on our website. Just go to KSN.com.
Memorial services have not yet been announced, but when Dole will lie in state at the Capitol Rotunda this week, it will be restricted to invited guests only. Senator Jerry Moran believes there will be a memorial service at the National Cathedral and a ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery. No formal remembrance or memorial has been scheduled in Kansas at this time. Still to come, a look at Dole's many accomplishments in Congress, the bipartisanship that led to laws that still impact Kansans today.
Plus, we travel to Russell to see the lasting legacy Dole left on his hometown. Welcome back. Former Senator Bob Dole has been honored in many ways over the years for his contribution to our nation. In 2018, he was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian honor to be given by Congress. Then President Trump attended the ceremony, calling Dole a, quote, true American hero. In 1997, just months after Dole lost the presidential election, he received an honor from his former rival. Then President Bill Clinton awarded Dole with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor.
Dole may be known best nationally as the 1996 Republican nominee for president, but it was his decades in Congress that brought legislation that continues to have an impact on our country today. He cast thousands of votes in Congress, but certain efforts, a source of pride for Dole.
I was on every farm bill, which is very important to Kansas.
He spent 27 years serving on ag committees in both the House and the Senate, playing a key role in the 1985 Farm Bill. Dole will be remembered for his ability to reach across the aisle.
Bob Dole was a master at working with people from the other party and not giving up, everything, but coming up with a compromise.
In 1977, he joined with Democrat George McGovern to reform the food stamp program, now known as SNAP.
He made it a much better program, and he made it a program that could work going forward.
Dole and McGovern would team up again to support WIC funding, food for women, infants, and children in the 80s. And would champion food security for children well past both their political careers. His leadership role in the Senate began in 1985. In 1990, he focused on helping those with disabilities.
The Americans with Disabilities Act, I worked with Ted Kennedy on that and some other Democrats.
His injury in World War II guided him in his advocacy, helping to create the landmark legislation.
This prohibited discrimination in public places, in universities, and restaurants, and really was a game changer in terms of how Americans looked at discriminations.
But his greatest legislative accomplishment? Here's what Dole told us in 2018.
I don't know, I've thought about that a lot because I was involved in almost all the legislation. But I think working with Senator Moynihan to rescue Social Security would be my biggest achievement in a bipartisan way.
The compromise legislation, signed into law in 1983, would save Social Security payments through increased payroll taxes and spending reforms.
And Ronald Reagan, who was president at the time, was overjoyed that the two parties were working together. What Bob Dole did was show both parties can give up a little and get a little when it concerns something as big as Social Security.
Something Dole would be proud to do for many years in Senate leadership.
Well, we had a very good group of Republican senators when I was the leader, and we had many, maybe many's too strong, but we had a number of Democrats we could work with. And so we got things done, and I'm proud of it.
Bob Dole represented that spirit of working together for what he thought was best for Americans.
And Dole's legislative legacy is remembered in Lawrence at the Dole Institute of Politics at KU.
It opened in 2003 on his 80th birthday. He said he did not want it to be a shrine to him. Instead, it encourages public service and civilized debate. The Institute is expanding hours this week to celebrate Dole's life and his legacy of bipartisanship. You can also share your memories of the former senator on the Institute's website. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Bob Dole left his mark on Kansas in many ways, and in Wichita, the Robert J. Dole VA Medical Center stands as a lasting tribute to his dedication to those who have served our country.
This medical center serves 59 counties in the state and operates 6 community-based outpatient clinics. The hospital originally opened in 1933, renamed and dedicated for Dole in 2002, and there have been several expansions in recent years, including a larger emergency department and a substance abuse rehab facility.
Dole visited the hospital in 2019, surprising veterans, shaking hands and posing for pictures. There, he heard stories from fellow veterans, some who also served in World War II.
Dole's support of veterans came from his experience and injury in World War II. After Pearl Harbor, Dole and several of his friends, fellow students at KU, went to Kansas City to volunteer to enlist. Both Dole and his friend Don Harold wanted to be pilots, but both were colorblind, unable to fly. They would both end up in the Army, where Dole would be injured in Italy in 1945, a story he'd later recount to his college buddy.
I asked him, I said, how'd you get that wound? How'd you get wounded so bad? He said, well, he said, we were attacking this hill. He said, we're going up this hill. He said, I could see my name in the Russell Daily News. Dole wipes out machine gun nest. And he said, the next thing I didn't know, he said, I couldn't move. And he said he was hit by a lot of artillery.
Harold said he had always known Dole as a big guy, 200 pounds, but when he saw him during his recovery, he said Dole was down to about 100 pounds.
Many World War II veterans were able to experience the memorial in D.C. thanks to the Kansas Honor Flight. Representatives from Kansas Honor Flight marked Dole's passing by saying it is a tremendous loss for our country, saying we will miss but never forget his heroics, patriotism, friendship, and sharp wit.
One of Bob Dole's most memorable moments in recent years came when he honored a fellow veteran and a former political rival. This was December 4th, 2018, nearly 3 years ago to the day when he rose from his wheelchair to salute the flag-draped casket of former President George H.W. Bush. The two men had what was considered one of the most prominent rivalries in American politics. Now, the two eventually developed mutual respect for one another. President George W. Bush saying Dole, quote, represented the finest of American values.
Welcome back. In Bob Dole's hometown of Russell, you can find many symbols of the town's pride, from the water tower to a mural that features Dole.
Yeah, but to get to know the man, you simply have to talk to those who knew him. KSN's Craig Andrus has the story.
Those 2 boxes, all of this kind of stuff. We've got posters.
Looking through years of Dole political memorabilia donated to the Russell County Historical Society, you will get a glimpse into his legacy.
Sometimes it's a real surprise what you run into, but
Beyond the pieces of history is a celebration of who the man was.
Extraordinary skills of keeping people's names, unbelievable amount of memory that he seemed to have, and he never lost his touch with the common man.
Outside of Kansas, most would remember him as a presidential nominee. But here in Russell, they remember Dole's connection to his roots. Bob Dole's boyhood home here is not open for tours, but we did get the chance to talk to Bob Dole's nephew, who lives here to this day.
Bob offered the house. He said, "Do you guys want to move into that house? I want somebody in that house."
Larry and his wife Kathy moved into this house at the request of his uncle to keep the Dole house in good shape. He says Dole checked in regularly and stayed connected to the people in Russell and his extended family.
He called us, and when he calls here, the first thing he wants to know is, how are you doing? How's your family doing? How's the rest of the family doing? It's not about Bob.
He says even when Dole called to reveal his cancer diagnosis to them, he first asked how they were doing. The bits and pieces of Dole's legacy scattered across town, from a mural to the water tower, tell his story and show the town's pride. His church, where he continued to write checks of support, displays a letter of gratitude from Dole himself, continuing to thank the community for support over the years. At the school building where Dole once walked the halls, he is honored and celebrated.
And everybody loves Bob. I mean, I don't know anybody that doesn't love Bob Dole. He's a great icon for respect and goodness.
The school walls honor Dole's legacy with his own words: when it's all over, it's not who you were, it's whether you made a difference. A difference and a lasting legacy for Russell and a nation.
Great community servant, I think, is his legacy.
Craig Andrus, KSN News 3.
And when we come back, a look at the former senator's well-known sense of humor.
And his words of wisdom for the next generation.
Many who knew Bob Dole would tell you he had a great sense of humor.
Toward the end of his political career, he even became known as a pop culture icon. His TV commercials included everything from Viagra to Visa. He was featured in a Super Bowl commercial for Pepsi that featured Britney Spears.
Yeah, his dry wit was clear in his appearances with Norm Macdonald on Saturday Night Live.
Believe me, Norm, running for president doesn't always keep you in the front pages unless you, of course, take a dive off a podium.
Yeah, that did get a lot of coverage, didn't it?
Yeah, and thanks for noticing here on Saturday Night Live. I appreciate it.
In one of Bob Dole's final Twitter posts, Dole paid tribute to Macdonald, who passed away earlier this year, saying, quote, "Norm was a great talent, and I loved laughing with him on SNL. Bob Dole will miss Norm Macdonald," and some of that humor was on display in recent years.
He combined laughter and some wisdom in his address to the Fort Hays State University class of 2016.
I've been trying to figure out for months, what does a 92-year-old man tell 22-year-old graduates, except good luck? Well, thank you for coming. Maybe you didn't have any choice. No diploma if you don't show up. Anyway, you know, I don't know whether you believe me or not, but I'm a pretty honest guy. And this is a real honor for me, in the sort of the twilight of my career, to speak to young people who are future leaders. To the graduates, I just want to say a couple of things. Compromise is not a bad word if it's positive. Don't make some negative word. When I was a Republican leader, you know, we used to speak to each other. Democrats and Republicans, and you had Republicans and Democrats, but you also had friends. And so you work things out. You know, people have tried to label me as liberal, too conservative, too this. And I confess to trying to work things out with my colleagues in both parties. So keep in mind that
There are a lot of good people in this country. They come from different parties and different backgrounds and different races, and they're Americans. I really believe the future is bright. Now, maybe that's just from some old man who, you know, he's off his ticker. But I'm old in body, but my mind is still pretty sharp. And if I could leave just one word, there's no place like America. We can fuss, we can disagree, but we're living in a free country.
And we hope you'll take a moment to go to our website, KSN.com, to see our complete coverage on Bob Dole. You can learn about his life and accomplishments and how to share your condolences. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
And we leave you tonight with the words of Bob Dole himself on how he hopes you will remember him. Good night.
What do you want your legacy to be?
Well, that I was happily married and I loved my wife and my daughter. And above all, I care about people. And I guess I've sort of latched on to the veterans as a little public service I can still do.